changing every day. We'll find the words to lead the way, unraveling the deep design. Let's read between the bottom lines. From where we've been to where we go, we're tracing out the things we know. Everything with Everett. Everything with Everett, yeah. We're just getting started. Everything with Everett.
Well, that was fun and catchy, wasn't it? Anyway, I'm with you again. Welcome back. Thank you for pressing play. As always, you're my loyal people, and I appreciate you. So I'm sure you have heard about the headlines lately, and, the president talking about the pros and cons of this organization called NATO. I'm sure we've all heard about it. It's been around for most of all of our lifetimes that, anyone who's currently alive, I don't think at this point anyone was, really, a lot of people that were alive when this thing was formed are quickly dying. So this thing is definitely older than most of us. So today I want to talk about NATO. What is NATO? I didn't even know what it stood for before I looked into this. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. I really wish we taught children in class about NATO. Obviously, I remember hearing about NATO, and it's a huge part of how we, won World War II and all came together as a world and fought against fascism, the great Antifa war. World War II, D-Day, was literally members of Antifa going to another country to take out fascists because American values are anti-fascist. Antifa. I'm just making light of, some of the crap that's going on in our world. Like, come on, are we really debating whether or not Antifa is a value to be proud of? Like, hello, people. Our grandparents fought. They were Antifa. They fought against the fascists. It's these moments where we're just like, we're hosed. We're beyond hope, folks. But anyway, let's talk about NATO. Let's learn something about NATO. Let's, spread the word about NATO. Sorry, I cracked myself up. If you can't laugh at yourself, you're taking life way too seriously. So all of my sources today are coming from NATO directly. Their website is NATO, NATO.int, or I guess international.int, not .com, .int. NATO.int. Anywho, so awesome stuff. I feel like I could talk on and on, but I'd probably bore you, and I have to leave something for you to check out yourself and read and, plant that seed. And then you get to water that tree in your life of knowledge and then be like, guess what? Here's this beautiful piece of fruit from a thing called NATO that I learned. And then you pass it on to somebody else. And then pretty soon we become a much more enlightened and educated society. And our world becomes a better place because education is what matters most in this world. A constant yearning to know why. Why is it like that? Why are rich people so greedy? Why are laws so stacked against the poor? Educate yourself. Because at the end, all of us at the bottom, we're the only people that actually keep living through societies. No matter what the history books want to say, no matter how many ballrooms the rich oligarchs build in every country, the peasants always win. Anyway, So NATO, it stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. How did I not know that? How do we not collectively know that? We know it as NATO or, NAFTA. That's a whole other, I think a whole other thing. Maybe I'm opening a can of worms. Maybe I should dig into that one too. But, just this alphabet soup, as the conservatives would love to probably call it. So NATO, okay, I'm going to jump into the NATO website stuff. This is their page called A Short History of NATO. What's weird is they have several tabs. They have NATO history, and then next over it has a short history of NATO. If you try clicking the NATO history one, it takes you to the short history one. So I don't know if there was a bigger version that they've made unavailable or why they have two distinct tabs that implies that there's a longer, more in-depth version, but apparently there's not. But then they have some really cool ones too. They have another tab that says NATO history by theme, and then a history in snapshots. They've got some really cool pictures from, different wars and back in the day. It's just, I feel like we all could just deep dive into this and understand the alliances a lot better that we've benefited from for generations. So, a short history of NATO. This page provides a quick overview of NATO history from 1945 to present. It is often said that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was founded in response to the threat posed by the Soviet Union. This is only partially true. In fact, the alliance's creation was part of a broader effort to serve three purposes: deterring Soviet expansionism, forbidding the revival of nationalist militarism in Europe through the strong North American presence on the continent, and encouraging European political integration. The aftermath of World War II saw much of Europe devastated in a way that is now difficult to envision. Approximately 36.5 million Europeans had died in the conflict, 19 million of them civilians. Refugee camps and rationing dominated daily life. In some areas, infant mortality rates were 1 in 4. Millions of orphans wandered the burnt-out shells of former metropolises. In the German city of Hamburg alone, 500,000 people were homeless. In addition, communists aided by the Soviet Union were threatening elected governments across Europe. In February 1948, the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia was, with covert backing from the Soviet Union, overthrew the democratically elected government in that country. Then, in reaction to the democratic consolidation of West Germany, the Soviets blockaded Allied-controlled West Berlin in a bid to consolidate their hold on the German capital. The heroism of the Berlin airlift provided future allies with some solace, but...
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Imagine getting to hear my voice for 5 days before anybody else. That's the reality for Katie in Boise, Idaho. She gets to listen to every new episode for 5 days before anyone else in North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, or South America. For just $10 a month, you too can access this exclusive feature. Go to listen.everettpodcast.com to find out the details, or if you'd just like to support the show, there's options for that as well. Privation remained a grave threat to freedom and stability. Privation, like privatization, privation, not starvation. Anyway, let me look that up real quick. Privation. Privation is the severe lack or loss of basic necessities for life, such as food, warmth, shelter, or psychological, emotional care, leading to hardship, emotional distress, and potential long-term harm to physical and mental health. It often stems from poverty, war, or negligence, manifesting as a state of scarcity. Oh, pro-life values. I get it. Not pro-birth. Life. Happy life. A full stomach. A roof over your head. You know. Values of a civilized society. Continuing. A treaty for our age. Fortunately, by then, the United States had turned its back on its traditional policy of diplomatic isolationism. Aid provided through the U.S.-funded Marshall Plan, also known as the European Recovery Program, and other means fostered a degree of economic stability. European states still needed confidence in their security, however, before they could begin talking and trading with each other. Military cooperation and security it would bring would have to develop a parallel with economic and political progress. So it helped these countries that had just survived this war of like attacking each other and like not knowing where, you know, the gunfire was coming from, basically start to like let the waters calm and rebuild their trades and discussions and, you know, get back to being a peacetime situation. Continuing again, with this in mind, several Western European democracies came together to implement various projects for greater military cooperation and collective defense, including the creation of the Western Union in 1948. Later, it became the Western European Union in 1954. In the end, it was determined that only a truly transatlantic security agreement could deter Soviet aggression, while simultaneously preventing the revival of European militarism and laying the groundwork for political integration. Accordingly, after much discussion and debate, the North Atlantic Treaty was signed on the 4th of April, 1949. In the treaty's renowned Article 5, the new allies agreed, quote, "An armed attack against one or more of them shall be considered an attack against them all," end quote. And that following such an attack, each ally would take, quote, "such action as it deems necessary, including the use of armed forces," end quote, in response. Significantly, Articles 2 and 3 of the treaty had important purposes. Treaty had important purposes, not immediately germane to the threat of attack. Article 3 laid the foundation for cooperation in military preparedness between the Allies, and Article 2 allowed them some leeway to engage in non-military cooperation. In 1954, Dwight D. Eisenhower was quoted as saying, "We do not keep security establishments merely to defend property or territory or rights abroad or at sea. We keep the security forces to defend a way of life." While signing the North Atlantic Treaty had created allies, it had created a military structure that could effectively coordinate their actions. This changed when growing worries about Soviet intentions culminated in the Soviet detonation of an atomic bomb in 1949 and in the outbreak of the Korean War in 1950. The effect upon the alliance was dramatic. NATO soon gained a consolidated command structure with the military headquarters based in the Parisian suburb of Roquencourt, Roquencourt, near Versailles. This was the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe. Or SHAPE, with U.S. General Dwight D. Eisenhower as the first Supreme Allied Commander Europe, or SACEUR, SACEUR, Soon afterward, the Allies established a permanent civilian secretariat in Paris and named NATO's first Secretary General Lord Ismay of the United Kingdom. And then scrolling past this picture of a truck driving over a bridge, it says you are crossing the 38th parallel. I think those are in the Korean War. My grandfather fought in the Korean War. With the benefit of aid and a security umbrella, political stability was gradually restored to Western Europe, and the post-war economic miracle began. New allies joined the alliance, Greece and Turkey in 1952, and West Germany in 1955. European political integration took its first hesitant steps. In reaction to West Germany's NATO accession, the Soviet Union and its Eastern European client states formed the Warsaw Pact in 1955. Europe settled into an uneasy standoff, symbolized by the construction of the Berlin Wall in 1961. Wow, how did I not know that the Berlin Wall was built the year my mom was born? Our history is like not that old, yet it feels so long ago. During this time, NATO adopted the strategic doctrine of massive retaliation. If the Soviet Union attacked, NATO would respond with nuclear weapons. The intended effect of this doctrine was to deter either side from risk-taking, since any attack, however small, could have led to full nuclear exchange. The beginning of the Cold War, the nuclear arms race, yes. Simultaneously, massive retaliation allowed alliance members to focus their energies on economic growth rather than on maintaining large conventional armies. The alliance also took its first steps towards a political as well as military role. Since the alliance's founding, the smaller allies in particular had argued for a greater non-military cooperation, and the Suez Crisis in the fall of 1956 laid bare the lack of political consultation that divided some members. In addition, the Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik satellite in 1956 shocked the Allies into greater scientific cooperation. A report delivered to the North Atlantic Council by Foreign Minister of Norway, Italy, and Canada, the Three Wise Men, as they were called apparently, recommended a more robust consultation and scientific cooperation within the alliance, and the report's conclusion led inter alia, don't know why that's italicized, to the establishment of the NATO science program. And then next paragraph it says, from defense to détente. In the 1960s, this uneasy but stable status quo began to change. Cold War tensions reignited as Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev and U.S. President John F. Kennedy narrowly avoided conflict in Cuba, and as American involvement in Vietnam escalated. Despite the
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are your family memories fading in a dusty box? VHS tapes don't last forever. Save those irreplaceable moments of the kids, grandparents, and family holidays before the tape degrades. I convert old VHS tapes to high-quality digital formats like MP4, so everyone in the family can easily share and watch them from their phones or TVs today. Here are the details. Just $40 a tape, includes setup, full real-time capture, and final editing. There are free delivery options. You can get your files via secure Google Drive link, or you can provide your own medium, such as a USB drive or DVD writable CDs. I'm local to the Southeast Pennsylvania area, from Allentown down to Philadelphia, but if you're interested in my services nationally, contact me and we can arrange for shipping and other methods to get those to me. Don't let your history fade away. Email me today to get started. Email vhs@everettmcconaughey.com or vhs@everettpodcast.com. wow, I've never seen this word, unpropitious start. By decade's end, what had been primarily a defense-based organization came to embody a new phenomenon, détente, a relaxation of tensions between the Western and Eastern blocs driven by a grudging acceptance of the status quo. During this decade, NATO and SHAPE unexpectedly moved to their new home. In March 1966, France announced its intention to withdraw from NATO's integrated military command structure and requested the removal of Allied headquarters from French territory. A new SHAPE headquarters was established in Casteau, Casteau, Belgium, in March 1967, and NATO headquarters moved to Brussels in October of the same year. Significantly, France remained within the alliance and consistently emphasized its intention to stand together with its allies in the event of hostilities. France also proved to be among the alliance's most valuable force contributors during later peacekeeping operations. Flexibility was always key to NATO's success, and the French withdrawal from NATO's integrated military command structure demonstrated that NATO, unlike the Warsaw Pact, could tolerate differing viewpoints between its members. As a reminder of this point, in August 1968, the Soviet Union led an invasion of Czechoslovakia that put an end to a period of political liberalization in that country, known as the Prague Spring, like a similar invasion of Hungary in 1956 and military repression in Berlin in 1953. Soviet actions demonstrated that what became known as the Brezhnev Doctrine, given the choice between short-term control and Eastern European states, and long-run political and economic reform, the Soviet Union would choose to maintain short-term control, and the end of this policy would await Soviet leader willing to choose long-run reform. Détente had many faces. West German Chancellor Willy Brandt's Ostpolitik sought to encourage European stability through closer relations between Eastern and Western Europe. U.S. President John F. Kennedy's strategy of flexible response sought to replace massive retaliations, absolute dichotomy of peace or total nuclear war. Adopted in the wake of the Cuban Missile Crisis, flexible response enhanced NATO's conventional defense posture by offering military responses short of a full nuclear exchange in the event of conflict. Also during this time, a report entitled "The Future Tasks of the Alliance," delivered in December 1967 to the North Atlantic Council by Belgian Foreign Minister Pierre Harmel, recommended that NATO should have a political track promoting dialogue and détente between NATO and Warsaw Pact countries. The role of NATO had become not merely to preserve the status quo, but to help change it. The Harmel report helped lay the foundation for the convening of the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe in 1973. 2 years later, the conference led to the negotiation of the Helsinki Final Act. The act bound its signatories, including the Soviet Union and members of the Warsaw Pact, to respect the fundamental freedom of their citizens, including the freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief. Soviet rulers internally played down these clauses within the act, acting attaching more importance to the Western recognition of the Soviet role in Eastern Europe. Eventually, however, the Soviets came to learn that they had bound themselves to powerful and potentially subversive ideas. The Cold War revived. In 1979, Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and the Soviet deployment of the SS-20 Sabre ballistic missile in Europe led to the suspension of détente. To counter the Soviet deployment, Allies made the dual-track decision to deploy nuclear-capable Pershing II and ground-launched cruise missiles in Western Europe while continuing negotiations with the Soviets. The deployment was not scheduled to begin until 1983. In the meantime, the Allies hoped to achieve an arms control agreement that would eliminate the need for weapons. Lacking the hope for agreement with Soviets, NATO members suffered internal discord when deployment began in 1983. Following the ascent of Mikhail Gorbachev as Soviet premier in 1985, the United States and Soviet Union signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces (INF) Treaty in 1987, eliminating all nuclear and ground-launched ballistic and cruise missiles with intermediate ranges. This is now regarded as the initial indication that the Cold War was coming to an end. The 1980s also saw the accession of NATO's first new member since 1955. In 1982, a newly democratic Spain joined the transatlantic alliance. By the mid-1980s, most international observers believed the Soviet communism had lost the intellectual battle with the West. Dissidents had dismantled the ideological supports of communist regimes and process aided in retrospect by the Soviet Union's own ostensible adherence to human rights principles outlined by the Helsinki Final Act. By the late 1980s, the communist government of Poland had found itself forced to negotiate with the formerly repressed independent trade union Solidarity as its leader, Lech. Can't tell if it's it's definitely something. It looks like WALESA, but it could be WATESA. Some weird little Sonic U's, as I hear they're called on the letters here. Soon, other democratic activists in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union itself would begin to demand those very rights. By this time, command economies in the Warsaw Pact were disintegrating. The Soviet Union was spending 3 times as much as the United States on defense, with the economy that was 1/3 the size. Mikhail Gorbachev came to power with the intention of fundamentally reforming the communist system. With the East German regime began to collapse in 1989, the Soviet Union did not intervene, reversing the Brezhnev Doctrine. This time, the Soviets chose long-run reform over a short-run control that was increasingly beyond their capabilities, setting in motion a train of events that led to the breakup of the Warsaw Pact. Be careful what you wish for, it says. Manfred Warner, the NATO Secretary General in 1993, said, "The collapse of the Soviet communism has left us with a paradox. There is less threat, but also less peace." Continuing with the history, the fall of the Berlin Wall on the 9th of November 1989 seemed to proclaim a new era of open markets, democracy, and peace. The Allies reacted with incredulous joy as emboldened demonstrators overthrew Eastern European communist governments, but there was also frightening uncertainties. Would a united Germany be neutral? what would become of nuclear weapons in the former Soviet republics, would nationalism once again curse European politics, and for NATO, the question was existential. Was there any future need of the Atlantic Alliance? And then there's a video about the hole in the Berlin Wall in 1989. I'm not going to play that because, that's their content. NATO endured because while the Soviet Union was no more, the alliance's two other original, if unspoken, mandates still held: to deter the rise of militant nationalism and to provide the foundation for collective security that would encourage democratization and political integration in Europe. Sometimes words are hard, folks. The definition of Europe had merely expanded eastward. Before the consolidation of peace and security could begin, however, one specter haunting European politics remained to be exercised. Since the Franco-Prussian War, Europe had struggled to come to terms with the United Germany. At its heart, the incorporation of a reunified Germany into the alliance put this most ancient and destructive dilemmas to rest. In 1991, as in 1949, NATO was to be the foundation stone for a larger pan-European security architecture. In December 1991, the Allies established the North Atlantic Cooperation Council, renamed the Euro-Atlantic Partnership Council in 1997. This forum brought the Allies together with their Central European and East European and Central Asian neighbors for joint consultations. Many of these newly liberated countries, or partners, as they were soon to be called, saw a relationship with NATO as fundamental to their own aspirations for stability, democracy, and European integration. Cooperation also extended southward. In 1994, the alliance founded the Mediterranean Dialogue with 6 non-member Mediterranean countries: Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Mauritania, Morocco, and Tunisia, with Algeria also joining in 2000. The dialogue seeks to contribute to security and stability in the Mediterranean through the better mutual understanding. This fledgling cooperation was soon put to the test. The collapse of communism had given way to the rise of nationalism and ethnic violence, particularly in the former Yugoslavia. At first, allies hesitated to intervene in what was perceived as a Yugoslavic civil war. Later, the conflict came to be seen as a war of aggression and ethnic cleansing, and the alliance decided to act. Initially, NATO offered its full support to the United Nations efforts to end the war crimes, including the direct military action in the form of a naval embargo. Soon, the enforcement of a no-fly zone led to airstrikes against heavy weapons violating UN resolutions. Finally, the alliance carried out a 9-day air campaign in September 1995 that played a major role in the ending of the conflict. In December of that year, NATO deployed a UN-mandated multinational force of 60,000 soldiers to help implement the Dayton Peace Agreement and to create the conditions of a self-sustaining peace. In 2004, NATO handed over this role to the European Union. And then, scrolling past some pictures from all that, the Yugoslav conflict, the other contemporaneous conflicts in the Caucasus and elsewhere, made clear that the post-Cold War power vacuum was a source of dangerous instability. Mechanisms for partnership had to be strengthened in a way that would allow non-NATO countries to cooperate with the alliance to reform still evolving democratic and military institutions and to relive their strategic isolation. As part of this evolving effort, allies created the Partnership for Peace Program, or PFP, in 1994. The Partnership for Peace allowed non-NATO countries or partners to share information with NATO allies and to modernize their militaries in line with modern democratic standards. Partners were encouraged to choose their own level of involvement with the alliance. The path to full membership would remain open to those who decided to pursue it. The process reached an important milestone in 1999, Washington Summit, when 3 former partners, Czechia, Hungary, and Poland, took their seats as full alliance members following their completion of the political and military reform program. Through the enlargement, NATO had played a crucial role in consolidating democracy and stability in Europe. Even before the new allies joined NATO in Washington, however, a new crisis had already broken out. By the end of 1998, over 300,000 Kosovar Albanians had fled their homes during the conflict between Albanian separatists in Kosovo and Serbian military and police. Following the failure of intense international efforts to resolve this crisis, the alliance conducted airstrikes for 78 days and flew 38,000 sorties with the goal of allowing a multinational peacekeeping force to enter Kosovo and cease ethnic cleansing in the region. On the 4th of June 1999, NATO suspended its air campaign after confirming that a withdrawal from the Serbian army from Kosovo had begun, and the deployment of NATO-led Kosovo Force, KFOR, followed shortly thereafter. Today, KFOR troops are still deployed in Kosovo to help maintain a safe and secure environment and freedom of movement for all citizens, irrespective of their ethnic origin. The 9/11 catalyst. NATO's experiences in Bosnia and Kosovo demonstrated that the debate on whether NATO was to enforce a European peace was moot. Events had forced the alliance's hand. Before the fall of Berlin Wall, NATO had been a static organization whose mere existence was enough to deter the Soviet Union. Balkan intervention began the alliance's transformation into a more dynamic and responsive organization. Gone was the Cold War doctrine of nuclear retaliation, and in its place, the determination to use, after all peace means had failed, measured and carefully applied force in combination with diplomatic and humanitarian efforts to stop conflict, and to do so, if necessary, out of NATO's traditional North Atlantic sphere. Accordingly, the alliance adopted a new strategic concept describing the alliance purpose and priorities. Most previous strategic concepts had been classified. In 1991, the alliance had issued for the first time an unclassified concept in the wake of the Soviet Union's decline. The concept that followed in 1999 stated that since the end of the Cold War, the world had come to face a complex new risk to Euro-Atlantic peace and security, including the oppression, ethnic conflict, economic distress, the collapse of the political order, and the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. These words would soon prove prescient. The September 11, 2001 attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon demonstrated to the Allies that political disorder in distant parts of the globe could have terrible consequences at home. For the first time in its history, NATO invoked the Collective Defiance Clause, Article 5. Sub-state actors, in this case, the Al-Qaeda terrorist group, had used Afghanistan as a base to export instability to the industrialized world, adopting hijacked airliners as improvised weapons of mass destruction to kill thousands of civilians. Subsequent attacks, including the Istanbul bombings in November 2003, the attack on the Madrid commuter train system on the 11th of March 2004, and the public transportation system in London on the 7th of July 2005, made clear that violent extremists were determined to target civilian populations. NATO Secretary General Lord Robertson was quoted saying, in very different circumstances to that envisaged by the authors of Article 5 in 1949, the military alliance had stood by an ally under attack. The world that day had changed, and NATO's transformation in the post 9/11 world had begun. He said that in 2011. In the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, a coalition of countries, including many NATO allies, militarily intervened in Afghanistan in the fall of 2001. The goal of the mission, Operation Enduring Freedom, was to deny Al-Qaeda a base of operations and to detain as many Al-Qaeda leaders as possible. In December 2001, following the overthrow of the Taliban regime, UN Security Council Resolution 1386 authorized the deployment of the International Security Assistance Force, ISAF, a multilateral force in and around Kabul to help stabilize the country and create the conditions of a self-sustaining peace. In August 2003, NATO took over command and coordination of ISAF. Meanwhile, NATO continued to accept new members and to build the new partnerships. The NATO-Russia Council was established in 2002 so that individual NATO member states and Russia could work as equal partners on security issues of common interest. In 2004, the alliance launched the Istanbul Cooperation Initiative as a way of offering practical bilateral security cooperation to countries of the broader Middle East region. Finally, subsequent rounds of enlargement brought more allies into the fold: Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia in 2004, Albania and Croatia in 2009, Montenegro in 2017, North Macedonia in 2020, Finland in 2023, and Sweden in 2024. A new approach for a new century. In Afghanistan, as in Bosnia and Kosovo, allies have seen that the military power is not enough to ensure peace and stability. Peacekeeping has been at least as difficult as peacemaking. During the Cold War years, Allied security had entailed the defense of the Northern Atlantic allies. Now, the definition of security has radically expanded to include the individual's freedom from the violent extremism bred by instability and nation-state failure. For instance, much of the world's attention in 2011 was focused on the crisis in Libya, where NATO played a crucial role in helping to protect civilians under attack from their own government, as mandated by the United Nations. The level of violence used by the Libyan security forces against pro-democracy protesters was such that the international community agreed to take a collective action. Indifference was simply not an option. Successful peacekeeping has come to entail not merely providing a baseline of security, but assisting in the construction of modernity itself. The task is beyond NATO, and the allies know it. The alliance is not and cannot be a civilian reconstruction agency, but NATO can make a significant contribution provided that it is part of the coherent international response. In the new strategic concept agreed in 2010, the alliance committed itself to dealing with all states of a crisis before, during, and after, an all-embracing principle that implies a greater role of cooperative security. This idea is at the heart of the comprehensive approach. Geopolitical instability demands complex remedies that combine military might, diplomacy, and post-conflict stabilization. Only the wildest possible coalition of international actors can provide elements of all three. Accordingly, the alliance is not only developing security partnerships with the countries across the Mediterranean, the Gulf region, and even the Pacific area, but it is also reaching out to other fellow international organizations and non-governmental organizations that have mandates in such areas as institution building, governance development, and judiciary reform. Whether helping to build lasting peace in Pristina, securing the Mediterranean Sea, or providing assistance to the African Union, NATO has been increasing cooperation with their international organizations that can bring their superior reconstruction and civil society building capabilities to bear. The 21st century will not be all about peace building, however. Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014 and its unjustified, unprovoked attack on Ukraine are a sobering reminder of the importance of NATO's core task, collective defense. This, coupled with the Syrian conflict and the rise of ISIL and the terrorism, and often homebred terrorism, has become a brutal reality across many continents. Meanwhile, tensions rise as migrants seek refuge from conflict in countries that are struggling with the weight of the ethnic and religious strife, demographic pressures, and economic underperformance. Cyber attacks are becoming more frequent and more destructive, and through social media and other means, the opponents of liberal, open societies are spreading disinformation and propaganda that seek to undermine the values that NATO has always sought to protect and promote. Although the complexity of the current security environment is such that NATO's flexibility is yet again put to the test. Since its founding in 1949, the transatlantic's flexibility embedded in its original treaty has allowed it to suit the different requirements of different times. In the 1950s, the alliance was purely a defensive organization. In the 1960s, NATO became a political instrument of détente. In the 1990s, the alliance was a tool for the stabilization of Eastern European and Central Asia through the incorporation of new partners and allies. In the first half of the 21st century, NATO faces an ever-growing number of new threats. As the foundation stone of the transatlantic peace and freedom, NATO must be ready to meet these challenges. Very interesting. I feel like NATO in many minds is just this static, if they bomb us, then then all these people that are part of NATO are going to come to our defense. And they've really moved on beyond that. That's such a primitive founding mindset, to keep them in that tiny of a box. Let's see about the founding treaty. This looks like it could be an interesting read. Probably a little bit shorter and hopefully a little bit less of a tongue twister. So this is the founding treaty page on their site. Again, all of this you can read for yourself if you'd like. Share it with a friend, someone who maybe needs to know more about NATO. Website is nato.int, nato.int. So the founding treaty, this was updated on September 2nd, 2022. Reading it with the English version. It looks like you can translate it. You can have it in English, French. Don't even know what language that is. And then I'm guessing this other one is probably Russian. So, find the one that suits your fancy. The foundations of the Northern Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, were officially laid down on the 4th of April 1949 with the signing of the North Atlantic Treaty, more popularly known as the Washington Treaty. I was going to read these little bullet points, but I feel like if I read the bullet points and then read the things that the bullet points come from, that would be just too much. So I'm just going to read the big block text. The treaty and its fundamental values and principles. Only 14 articles long, the treaty is one of the shortest documents of its kind. The carefully crafted articles were the subject of several months of discussion and negotiations before the treaty was actually signed. However, once Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, and the United Kingdom and the United States had discussed these issues, they agreed on a document that would establish the North Atlantic Alliance. On the 4th of April, 1949, the 12 countries signed the North Atlantic Treaty at the Departmental Auditorium in Washington, D.C., the city which lends its name to the treaty. The treaty committed each member to share the risk, responsibilities, and benefits of collective defiance. Why do I say the defiance? Collective defense. In defiance of aggression, okay? The treaty committed each member to share the risk, responsibilities, and benefits of collective defense, a concept at the very heart of the alliance. In 1949, the primary aim of the treaty was to create a pact of mutual assistance to counter the risk of the Soviet Union if they would seek to extend its control of Eastern Europe to other parts of the continent. The treaty also required members not to enter into any international commitments that conflicted with the treaty and committed them to the purpose of the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. Moreover, it is stated that NATO members formed a unique community of values committed to the principles of individual liberty, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. In addition to collective defense, the key values, the principle of the consensus decision-making, and the importance of consultation define the spirit of the organization, together with its defensive nature and its flexibility. The signing of the treaty led to the creation of the alliance, and only later did a fully fledged organization develop. In effect, the Northern Atlantic Treaty, NATO, provides the structure which enables the goals of the alliance to be implemented. To date, those goals have not fundamentally changed, nor the treaty been rewritten. The only so-called amendments made so far stem from the series of accession protocols which have been added as new members joined, illustrating the foresight of its drafters and their ability to marry international concerns with objectives with national interests. Political context of the alliance's birth. The hostilities that had characterized the relations between Soviet Western powers since 1917 gradually reemerged at the end of the Second World War. This East-West divide was fueled by conflicting interests and political ideologies. There were clashes over peace agreements and reparations, and tensions were exacerbated by events such as the Berlin blockade in April 1948, the June 1948 coup in Czechoslovakia, and the direct threats to the sovereignty of Norway, Greece, and Turkey. As the power of the Soviet Union spread to several East European countries, there was concern among Western European countries that Moscow would impose its ideology and authority across Europe. From the end of the Second World War in 1945, Western governments started reducing their defense establishments and demonstrating their forces. And demobilizing their forces. In January 1948, however, British Foreign Secretary Ernest Bevins spoke of the need for a treaty of alliance and mutual assistance, a defense alliance and regional grouping within the framework of the UN Charter. The United States would only agree to provide military support for Europe if it were united. In response, Belgium, France, Luxembourg, and Netherlands and the United Kingdom signed the Brussels Treaty in 1948, creating the Western Union. Designed to strengthen ties between the signatories while providing a common defense system, the Brussels Treaty ultimately became the basis for the Washington Treaty. It's 6:55 right now, and the kitties are in the background meowing, so if you hear them screaming, they're ready for dinner. And I'm not feeding them yet. In the meantime, the United Senate adopted a Vandenberg Resolution, a resolution that would change the course of American foreign policy since it allowed the United States to constitutionally participate in the mutual defense system in times of peace. The ground was set for negotiations to start and the transatlantic treaty. Negotiating and drafting the treaty. The talks on what would become the Washington Treaty took place between the powers of the Brussels Treaty, except Luxembourg, which was represented by Belgium, plus the United States and Canada. Representatives from Canada, United Kingdom, and the United States constituted the core drafting team, but participants from other countries also contributed to the initial discussions with the assistance of a working group. What has been coined as the Six Power Talks gave birth to the Washington Paper, issued the 9th of September 1948, which contained an outline of possible future articles for the treaty. Formal public treaty negotiations began on the 10th of December 1948 with the Ambassadors Committee in Washington, D.C. For these talks. Luxembourg sent its own representative. Denmark, Iceland, Italy, Norway, and Portugal were later invited to the final sessions of the negotiations, which began on the 8th of March 1949. Although the participating countries agreed that collective defense would be at the heart of the new alliance, several other issues were still not resolved and needed to be worked out before the formation of the alliance could become a reality. Collective defense. Views on the implementation of Article 5 differed. The United States had previously taken a stance of officially avoiding foreign entanglements. It was concerned that Article 5 would draw the country into a conflict through treaty obligations. Something had to be put in place to allow the United States to send aid to attacked countries without having to declare war. The European countries, on the other hand, wanted to ensure the United States would come to their aid if one of the signatories came under attack. The United States would not make this pledge and did not believe U.S. public opinion would follow, so they proposed an option that would allow each country to assist other signatories as it deems necessary. In other words, there would be no automatic declaration of war or obligation to commit militarily on part of the member countries. The action to be taken would be up to each individual member country. Ultimately, the American viewpoint on collective defense won out. Political and military cooperation. Some drafters wanted more than just military cooperation between signatories. They wanted to expand cooperation to social and economic cooperation, but there were differing views on how to treat non-military issues. Ultimately, Article 2 went through, and now, from the basis of the alliance's political and non-military work, Article 2 is reinforced by Article 4, which encourages the allies to consult together whenever they consider it necessary, therefore facilitating consensus building. The practice of regularly exchanging information and consulting together strengthens the links between governments and the knowledge their representatives' preoccupations so that they can agree on common policies or take action more easily. And geographical scope of the alliance. The geographical scope of the alliance in terms of area of responsibility was yet another topic on which the negotiators had a difference of opinion. The United States and United Kingdom saw NATO as a regional organization, while other countries, such as France, felt it should be a more global role. Article 6 of the Washington Treaty details what is understood by the alliance's geographical scope. And then this is an excerpt from Article 6. Article 6, for the purpose of Article 5, an armed attack on one or more parties is deemed to include an armed attack. Bullet point 1, on the territory of any parties in Europe or North America, on the Algerian departments of France, on the territory of Turkey, or on the island under the jurisdiction of any of the parties in the North Atlantic area north of the Tropic of Cancer. Bullet point number 2, on the forces, vessels, or aircraft of any of the parties when in or over these territories or any other area in Europe in which occupation forces of any of the parties were stationed on the date when the treaty entered into force, or the Mediterranean Sea or North Atlantic area of the Tropic of Cancer. Then there were some sub things next to the Department of France. That one says, hang on. Article 6, little footnote says, the definition of the territories to which Article 5 applies was revised by Article 2 of the Protocol of the North Atlantic Treaty on the accession of Greece and Turkey, signed the 22nd of October, 1951. And then the other footnote, on January 16th, 1963, the North Atlantic Council noted that insofar as the former Algerian departments of France were concerned, the relevant clauses of the treaty had become inapplicable as from July 3rd, 1962. Membership of the alliance, in terms of who to invite to join the alliance. Again, the drafters have held diverging views. The United States, United Kingdom wanted to keep the alliance small and strong, avoiding commitments to peripheral countries, while the United States advocated for inviting countries that were more likely to fall to Soviet aggression. France, on the other hand, was mainly concerned with protecting its colonial territories. Of concern were all three countries was Germany, whose membership was not immediately considered due to the complexity of its situation. The drafters also discussed inviting Italy, Greece, Turkey, Portugal, Iceland, and Scandinavian countries, essentially for their strategic value. Italy, Portugal, and Iceland were among the founding members, and ultimately Greece and Turkey joined the alliance in 1952. Iceland linked its membership to that of Denmark and Norway, which were also among the founding members in 1949. Sweden, on the other hand, refused to have any links with NATO because of its strong commitment to neutrality. Consideration was also given to offering membership to Ireland, Iran, Austria, and Spain, but the idea was dropped largely due to the internal conditions of each country. Colonial territories. The status of colonial territories was one of the biggest bones of contention in the drafts of the Washington Treaty. France insisted that including Algeria, while Belgium requested the Congo's inclusion. However, the United States and Canada wanted to exclude all colonial territory. The main concern was that NATO would end up having to resolve problems stemming from the native population of overseas territories. Ultimately, the drafters granted France's request to include Algeria too. I don't know if it's supposed to say 2 or if it's like some weird full-size footnote number that didn't link properly, which had been fully integrated into the French political and administrative organization as a French department, but rejected Belgium's request regarding the Congo. Duration of the treaty. The negotiating countries disagreed on how long the treaty should last. Some countries favored a long-term agreement that would set the initial duration at 20 years, while others feared that anything beyond 10 years would be seen as an unnecessary extension of the war effort. Finally, at the insistence of Portugal, the treaty was made valid for a 10-year period, which the treaty could be reviewed, Article 12, and only after the treaty had been in force for 20 years could a member withdraw from the organization, Article 13. To date, these two provisions have never been used. I.e., example given, the treaty has never been reviewed nor a member withdrawn from the organization. But the U.S. is talking about it, so we'll see. But based on what I've read from this site, and there's so much more here, folks. Like, I encourage you to go to the NATO site and look at the pictures and the videos and educate yourself on what NATO actually is, because it's more than just the vintage I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. They're more than just, hey, let's go launch some nukes. It's about trying to build a better world and, not just empowering the hands of government, but making sure that the citizens and the people that live in each country has a right to live and thrive. That's ultimately what we should be all aiming for. Peace after war is the goal, not war to the next war, till we're dead. And then we, don't remember what happened to the previous generation's struggle. So now you know a little bit more about NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, helping to make the world a better place.
Maps are changing every day. We'll find the words to lead the way, unraveling the deep design. Unraveling the deep design. Let's read between the bottom lines. Bottom lines. From where we've been to where we go, we're tracing out the things we know. The maps we drew today, now folded for the next turn. Leave the logic to linger until our voices meet again.